The photograph had gone soft at the edges, worn thin from 4 years of handling. Sam McKenna sat on the corral fence under the vast Texas sky, his calloused thumb tracing the outline of his sister's face. Hannah,
You can't
16
run
years
from
old
this.
forever.
I'm
The
not
smile
running.
in that
Then
photograph
face it
belonged to
right
a
now.
girl who believed the world was fundamentally good, who saw kindness in strangers, who never met a soul she couldn't find something to love. She had been wrong about that. The world had proven her wrong on December 7th, 1941. Sam folded the photograph carefully and tucked it back into his wallet next to the letter. He did not need to read the letter again. Every word had burned itself into his memory, seared there like a brand on cattle hide. Hannah's handwriting, that careful script she had practiced so diligently. Her words about Hawaii, about the ocean, about how people there treated each other like human beings, regardless of where they came from or what they looked like. The last line haunted him most. That's what makes America special, Wem. Ba'asikim. We see people as people. Tomorrow, Japanese prisoners would arrive at Camp Huntsville. Women, they said. Civilian prisoners, though, Sam was not entirely sure what that meant. The war had ended 6 weeks ago, and the world was still sorting through the wreckage, still counting the cost, still trying to figure out what to do with all the broken pieces. Sam's father had taught him 3 things about being a man. A man's word is his bond. A man protects those weaker than himself. A cowboy does not start fights, but he finishes them. Simple rules for a complicated world. But nothing in those rules told Sam what to do when the people who needed protecting were the same people who had killed his sister. The September sun beat down on the red Texas dirt. In the distance, cattle lowed peacefully, unaware and unconcerned with the wars of men. Sam envied them that ignorance. He heard boots on gravel before he saw Wade Hollister approaching. Wade walked like a man carrying a heavy load, shoulders hunched forward, eyes fixed on some point in the middle distance that only he could see. They had grown up together, Sam and Wade, learned to ride together, learned to rope cattle together, got drunk for the first time together on Wade's 18th birthday. That it was before the war, before Pearl Harbor, before Tommy. Wade stopped a few feet from the fence, squinting up at Sam. They arrive tomorrow. I know. Jake Morrison is organizing something. He wants to send them a message. Sam did not ask what kind of message. He could imagine well enough. And you, Wade's jaw worked silently for a moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. Tommy was 18 years old, Sam. 18. He died on some godforsaken island in the Pacific, killed by Japanese bullets. And now we're supposed to give them 3 meals a day and clean beds. They're women, Wade, not soldiers. They're Japanese. Wade spat the word like poison. That's enough. Sam climbed down from the fence, landing with a soft thud in the dust. He stood eye to eye with his friend, close enough to see the red threading through Wade's eyes, close enough to smell the whiskey on his breath, even though it was barely past noon. What did Tommy say in his last letter? Wade flinched as if Sam had struck him. Don't. What did he say, Wade? You know what he said. Say it anyway. Wade's hands clenched into fists at his sides. For a moment, Sam thought he might actually throw a punch. Instead, Wade's shoulders sagged. He said, don't let his death turn me into someone I'd be ashamed of. So don't. Wade turned away, staring out at the horizon where heat shimmers made the air dance and waver. I promised my mother I'd get justice for Tommy. She died 6 months after we got the telegram. Died of a broken heart. So now I've got promises to 2 dead people, and I don't know how to keep them both. Sam placed a hand on Wade's shoulder, feeling the tension thrumming through his friend's body like a plucked wire. Tommy didn't want justice. He wanted you to stay good. Wade shook off Sam's hand and walked away without another word. Sam watched him go, watched the dust rise and settle in his wake, and felt the weight of tomorrow pressing down on his chest like a stone. The truck arrived just after dawn, grinding to a halt in front of the main building. Sam stood in the shade of the supply shed watching. 20 Japanese women climbed down from the truck bed, blinking in the harsh morning light. They moved slowly, carefully, like people who had forgotten what it meant to feel safe. The youngest among them could not have been more than 19 or 20, rail thin with dark hair that hung limp around her face and eyes that seemed to look at everything and nothing at the same time. She climbed down from the truck, last moving with the mechanical precision of someone performing a task they had done 1,000 times before. Her hands trembled as she clutched a small bundle to her chest. Sam had expected to feel rage, had braced himself for the hot surge of hatred that would come when he looked at Japanese faces and remembered Hannah's last letter, remembered the telegram, remembered his mother's keening wail when they buried an empty coffin. But watching this young woman step onto Texas soil, watching her flinch at every sound and shadow, Sam felt something else entirely. He saw a person, a frightened, broken person who expected nothing but cruelty from the world. Grace. That was the name they had given her, or perhaps the name she had chosen. Sam learned it later after he had made his decision, after he had chosen to honor Hannah's words instead of his own pain. The other workers watched the prisoners with barely concealed hostility. Some muttered among themselves. A few made gestures that needed no translation. But Sam just stood there, remembering his sister's handwriting, remembering her belief that people deserved to be seen as people. He filled a tin cup with water from the barrel. The cup was old, dented from years of use, nothing special. But his hands were steady as he carried it toward the women's quarters. Grace had been assigned a small room with a single bed, a wooden table, and a window that let in the afternoon sun. She stood in the center of the room with her arms wrapped around herself, head bowed, waiting. Sam could see it in her posture. She was waiting for the bad thing to happen, waiting for the violence she had been promised would come. He knocked gently on the door frame. She did not look up. "Excuse me, ma'am." Sam kept his voice low and slow, giving her time to hear the words to understand that he meant no harm. "I figured you might be thirsty." He stepped just far enough into the room to set the tray on the table. A tin cup filled with cool water, a thick slice of bread, nothing more. He did not enter her space, did not crowd her, did not do anything that might make her feel trapped. "My name is Sam McKenna. If you need anything at all, you just holler. I work in the building to the west." He touched the brim of his hat, the way his father had taught him to acknowledge a lady. Then he turned and walked out. His boots echoed in the hallway. Behind him he heard nothing. No movement, no sound at all. But he imagined he could feel her eyes on his back, could sense the weight of her confusion and disbelief. Sam did not do it because it was easy. He did it because Hannah had believed in doing what was right even when it hurt, especially when it hurt. And standing in that hallway, listening to his own footsteps fade, Sam understood that every moment of kindness was a choice. Every act of mercy was a battle won against the easier path of hatred. The memory came to him unbidden as he walked back to the supply shed. Hannah, at 12 years old, bringing home a stray dog that was more mange than fur. Their father had said no, they could not afford another mouth to feed. But Hannah had looked up at him with those earnest eyes and said, "Daddy, nobody else wants him. If we don't take him, who will?" They had kept the day, named him Scraps. He had lived 8 good years on the McKenna Ranch before dying peacefully in his sleep. And Sam's father, tough old cowboy that he was, had cried when they buried Scraps behind the barn. That was the thing about Hannah. She had a way of making you want to be better than you thought you could be. Even now, 4 years after Pearl Harbor, 4 years after the telegram and the empty funeral, and all those nights Sam had lain awake imagining her final moments, Hannah was still making him choose the harder path. Grace sat on the edge of the bed for a long time after the cowboy left. Her hands were still shaking. The trembling had become so constant over the past 6 years that she barely noticed it anymore. But now it seemed worse somehow, more violent, as if her body was trying to process something her mind could not accept. The tin cup sat on the table, condensation beating on its battered surface. Just water, nothing else. No poison, no trick, no price to be paid. The man had given it to her and asked for nothing in return. In 6 years at the comfort station, no man had ever asked for nothing. Grace's mind kept replaying the moment, searching for the trap she must have missed. The way he had stood in the doorway, hat in hand, speaking in that slow drawl she could barely understand. The way he had set the tray down and immediately stepped back, respecting the space between them. The way he had tipped his hat and walked away without a backward glance. Japanese propaganda had been very clear about Americans. They were devils, beasts. They would torture and violate anyone they captured. They took pleasure in cruelty. And yet this man, this cowboy with dusty boots and a weathered face, had brought her water and bread and kindness. Grace reached for the cup with trembling fingers. The water was cold and clean. She brought it to her lips and drank, and the simple act felt like a revolution. For 6 years, every kindness had come with a price. Every soft word had preceded pain. Every gentle touch had been a lie. But this water asked nothing of her. This bread demanded no payment. This moment required nothing but her own thirst and hunger. She drank until the cup was empty, then sat holding it in both hands, feeling the metal warm against her palms. On her wrist, barely visible beneath her sleeve, was the jade bracelet her mother had given her the day the officers came. The only thing she had managed to keep hidden through 6 years of hell. The only proof that she had once been someone else. Someone who was loved. Grace touched the bracelet now and whispered into the empty room. "Why are they not hurting me?" No answer came. Only the sound of wind through the window and the distant lowing of cattle, and somewhere far off the strum of a guitar playing a melody she did not recognize. Sam knew he was being watched. Jake Morrison stood in the shadow of the mess hall, arms crossed, eyes hard. Jake had lost a brother at Guadalcanal, had come home from the war himself with a limp and a purple heart and a rage that had nowhere to go except inward. Sam nodded to him. Jake did not nod back. That evening, after the sun had set and the sky had turned the color of a bruise, Sam found a note tacked to his bunk. Just 4 words in Jake's angular handwriting. Meeting old warehouse, midnight. Sam went. Not because he wanted to join whatever Jake was planning, but because he needed to know, needed to understand what he was up against. 15 men had gathered in the warehouse that sat a quarter-mile from the main camp. Sam recognized most of them. Veterans, local ranchers, men who had lost brothers or sons or friends to Japanese bullets and bombs. Good men, most of them. Men who would help a neighbor with a barn raising or bring food to a grieving family. But grief had curdled into something toxic in their chests, and now they were looking for a way to ease that burning. Jake stood at the center of the group. When Sam entered, the conversation died. "McKenna," Jake's voice echoed in the empty space. "Glad you could make it. We were just discussing the prisoner situation." Sam said nothing, just waited. "See, some of us think it's wrong. Them sleeping in clean beds, eating our food, living comfortable while our boy rot in graves overseas." Jake's eyes swept the assembled men, gathering their agreement like fuel for a fire. "We think they need to understand there are consequences." "What kind of consequences?" Sam kept his voice level. "The kind that makes them remember they're not guests, they're the enemy. They're prisoners of war. There are rules." Jake laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Rules. Your sister died because of them, Sam. Died screaming, probably. Burned or drowned or crushed under rubble. And you want to talk about rules?" The men shifted, sensing the confrontation. Sam felt every eye on him, felt the weight of their judgment. He thought about Hannah, thought about her last letter, thought about what she would say if she could see him now. "I think about my sister every day," Sam said quietly. "Every single day. But hurting those women won't bring her back. Won't bring any of them back. So we do nothing." Wade's voice came from the shadows. Sam had not seen him, had not realized his friend was part of this. "We do our jobs. We treat them according to the law. We don't become the monsters they told their people we were." Jake stepped forward. "You protecting them, McKenna, choosing their side?" "I'm choosing the side that lets me look at myself in the mirror tomorrow morning." Sam met Jake's eyes without flinching. "I'm choosing the side my sister would want me on." "Your sister is dead." "I know." Sam's voice cracked just slightly on those 2 words. "Believe me, I know. And if I thought killing those women would bring Hannah back, I might be tempted. But it won't. All it will do is make her death mean less, make it count for nothing." The warehouse fell silent. Sam could hear his own heartbeat, could hear the breathing of 15 men, deciding whether he was a traitor or just a fool. Finally, one man stepped away from the group, then another, then 3 more. By the time the exodus stopped, Jake had only 5 men left standing with him. Jake's face had gone red. "Saturday night, 2 in the morning. We're going to teach them a lesson, McKenna. And if you try to stop us, you'll be choosing them over your own people." Sam held Jake's gaze. "Then I guess I'll see you Saturday." He walked out into the night, feeling the hatred radiating from those who remained behind. But he also felt something else, something that might have been pride, or might have been just the faint echo of Hannah's voice saying, That's my big brother, always doing the hard thing. The first meal came at dawn. Grace was led to the mess hall with the other Japanese women, all of them moving in that same careful, frightened shuffle. They sat at long wooden tables, hands folded, heads bowed, waiting. When the plates arrived, Grace stared at hers as if it had fallen from another world. 3 strips of bacon, crisped to perfection, the fat rendered to a golden translucence. 2 eggs fried in butter, their yolks like small suns. A mound of mashed potatoes glistening with melted butter. 2 slices of toast. A glass of milk. A cup of orange juice. Grace had not seen this much food intended for one person in 6 years. Slowly, carefully, she picked up the fork. She had never used one before, had eaten everything with chopsticks or her fingers, but she managed to spear a piece of bacon and bring it to her lips. The crunch when her teeth broke through the surface was perfect. The salt hit her tongue first, bright and sharp, followed immediately by the deep, savory richness of the pork fat. Then came the smoke, filling her nose and throat with warmth. Tears spilled down Grace's cheeks and dripped onto the plate. She did not try to stop them. Could not have stopped them if she wanted to. They came from somewhere deep inside, from a place she had locked away so long ago that she had forgotten it existed. She was crying because the bacon was delicious. She was crying because someone had cooked it for her. She was crying because for 6 years no one had cared whether she was hungry or full, comfortable, or suffering, alive or dead. And now, in this strange place on the other side of the world, someone had handed her a plate full of food and expected nothing in return. Grace ate every bite. When she finished, she sat with her hands in her lap, staring at the empty plate, and she did not know who she was anymore. Sam watched from the corner of the mess hall, watched the tears streaming down the young woman's face, watched her eat as if each bite might be her last, and he understood, perhaps for the first time, the full weight of what had been done to her, the full depth of the hell she had survived. But Wade was watching too. Sam saw him standing in the opposite corner, hands clenched around a coffee cup, jaw tight with barely contained fury. Watching a Japanese woman weep with joy over American bacon while Tommy Hollister lay cold in the ground. Their eyes met across the room. In Wade's gaze, Sam saw a question, a challenge, a line being drawn in the dust. Saturday was coming, and when it did, Sam would have to decide how far he was willing to go to keep his promise to a dead girl who had believed in the goodness of strangers. That night, 3 people lay awake under the vast Texas sky, each carrying their own weight of grief and choice and uncertain tomorrows. Grace held her jade bracelet and whispered prayers to a mother who might not even be alive anymore. Wade stared at the ceiling of his bunk and felt the cold weight of his father's pistol hidden beneath his mattress. And Sam sat on the corral fence with Hannah's photograph in his hands, watching the stars wheel overhead, trying to find the strength to be the man his sister had believed he could be. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote howled. The sound carried across the empty plains, lonely and wild and free. And in that moment, suspended between the dying of one world and the uncertain birth of another, everything still hung in the balance. The tin cup sat on Grace's table, catching moonlight. Just a dented piece of metal. But in the economy of miracles, it might as well have been made of gold. The days between that first breakfast and Saturday night moved with the slow inevitability of storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Sam found himself watching Grace from a distance, cataloging the small changes that came over her like spring thaw. The way she no longer flinched quite so hard when footsteps approached. The way her shoulders straightened just slightly when Martha, the camp's head cook, spoke to her in that warm Texas drawl. But Sam also watched Wade, watched his friend's face grow harder each day, watched him polish his father's pistol with movements that had become ritualistic, almost religious. And Sam knew that Saturday was coming, whether he was ready or not. On Tuesday morning, Sam made a decision. He found Grace in the vegetable garden, where she had been assigned to work. She knelt between rows of tomato plants, pulling weeds with methodical precision, her hands moving in patterns that spoke of muscle memory earned through years of repetitive labor. "Miss Grace." Sam kept his distance, aware of how his height and bulk might seem threatening to someone who had learned to fear men. "I need to teach you something." She looked up, squinting against the morning sun. Her English was still halting, but understanding flickered in her eyes. Sam held out a thick piece of wood roughly the length of a baseball bat. "If someone tries to hurt you, you need to know how to protect yourself." Grace stared at the wood as if it might bite her. Her hands remained frozen at her sides. I know you don't want to hurt anyone. Sam's voice was gentle. This isn't about hurting. It's about getting away. You see a man coming at you with bad intentions, you swing this at his knees. He goes down, you run. That's all, just run. Slowly, Grace reached out and took the wood. It trembled in her grip. They practiced for an hour in the early morning light. At first, her swings were weak, apologetic things. But Sam was patient. He had trained horses after all. He understood that trust came in increments, that strength grew from repetition. Harder, he said. Pretend that stick is standing between you and getting hurt. Pretend it's the only thing keeping you alive. Something shifted in Grace's expression, some memory surfacing from the 6 years she never spoke about. Her next swing came fast and true, whistling through the air with enough force to crack bone. Good, Sam said quietly. Very good. Martha appeared at the edge of the garden, a kitchen knife glinting in her weathered hand. The old woman was 65 if she was a day, with silver hair, pulled back in a tight bun, and eyes that had seen a grandson died in Normandy. She walked straight up to Grace and held out the blade. For your pocket, honey, Martha said. If they get close enough that you can't swing that stick, you use this. Aim for the belly, push it in and twist. Then you pull it out and you run like hell. Grace looked between the knife and Martha's face, searching for the cruelty that had always accompanied such offers before. But Martha's expression held only grim practicality. I can't kill, Grace whispered. Martha's hand closed over hers, pressing the knife into her palm. You won't have to kill, child. You just have to make them wish they'd left you alone. Later that day, Sam found Wade sitting alone behind the stables, a half-empty bottle of whiskey at his feet. It was barely past noon. You planning to be drunk for Saturday? Sam asked. Wade did not look up. Planning to be drunk every day until Saturday. Then I'll be sober enough to do what needs doing. Sam sat down in the dust beside his friend. They had sat like this 1,000 times before. As boys catching crawdads in the creek. As teenagers nursing their first hangovers. As young men watching the war take everyone they knew and leave them behind. I went to see Reverend Davis yesterday, Wade said suddenly. Sam waited. Asked him how he forgave the Germans who killed his unit. He was in the First War, you know. Lost 12 men in one afternoon to machine gun fire. Wade took a long pull from the bottle. You know what he told me? What? He said forgiveness isn't for them, it's for you. Said hatred is chains and only forgiveness can cut them. Wade's laugh was bitter. Pretty words, but they don't bring Tommy back. Nothing brings them back, Sam's voice was rough. Believe me, I know, but we can choose whether their deaths make us better or worse. Wade finally turned to look at him. His eyes were red-rimmed and lost. How do you do it, Sam? How do you look at them and not see the ones who killed Hannah? I do see it. Sam pulled Hannah's photograph from his wallet, the edges now soft as cloth from handling. Every single time I look at that girl, Grace, I see my sister's face. I see Pearl Harbor. I see the telegram. I see my mother crying. Then how? Because Hannah wouldn't want me to become a monster in her name. Sam tucked the photograph away. And because Grace didn't kill Hannah any more than you or I killed whoever Tommy shot in the Pacific. We're all just people caught up in something bigger than us. Wade was silent for a long moment. Then he reached into his own pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. The creases were so deep they had nearly split the page in two. Reverend, I gave me this yesterday. Said it came a year ago, but he kept it because I wasn't ready. Wade's hands shook as he unfolded the letter. It's from Tommy, written before the last one. The one where he told me not to let his death change me. Sam watched his friend's face as Wade read, saw the tears tracking through dust on his cheeks. He says he's not afraid of dying. Wade's voice cracked. He says he's afraid of me living wrong. Says hatred creates war, not the other way around. Says the way to get revenge on war is to live well, to love much. Wade crumpled the letter against his chest. How am I supposed to do that, Sam? How am I supposed to love when the only person I ever really loved is dead? Sam put his arm around Wade's shoulders and let his friend cry. There were no words for this kind of grief. No platitudes that could ease the weight of a brother lost. All Sam could offer was presence. The simple solidarity of another man who understood what it meant to have a hole blown through the center of your life. They sat there until the shadows grew long and the whiskey bottle was empty and the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon. The new transport arrived on Thursday. 20 more Japanese prisoners from a camp in California where conditions had been harsher treatment, more cruel. They stepped off the truck looking even more broken than the first group, if such a thing was possible. Sam watched Grace's face as the prisoners filed past, watched her eyes widen and her hand fly to her mouth. Then she was running, moving faster than he had ever seen her move, throwing herself at one of the women with a cry that needed no translation. They clung to each other in the dust. Two women who had survived the same hell found each other again against impossible odds. Later, Grace brought the woman to meet Sam. Her name was Keiko. She was 30 years old and her eyes held a hardness that Grace's did not. This was someone who had learned to fight back, someone who had not yet decided whether survival was worth the cost. "My friend," Grace said in her careful English, pointing between them. "From before, she needs help." Sam looked at Keiko's hollow cheeks, the scar that ran along her jawline, the way she held herself like a woman expecting a blow. "I'll talk to the commander. See about getting her a private room." Keiko's eyes narrowed. "Why you help?" It was the same question Grace had asked in a dozen different ways. Sam gave the same answer. "Because I can." That evening, Sam found Grace and Keiko in the garden. Keiko was teaching Grace something in rapid Japanese, their hands moving in synchronized patterns. Origami, Sam realized. They were folding paper cranes from old newspapers. Martha appeared at his elbow. "Those two been through hell." "I know, but they're still making beautiful things." Martha's voice was soft with wonder. "That's what we do, isn't it? We survive the worst, and we still make beauty. That's how we win." Friday came too fast. Sam spent the day making preparations, gathering the few people he knew he could trust. Martha agreed immediately, her jaw set with determination. Roy, the night guard who had lost a son in Normandy, nodded once and began checking his shotgun. Carlos, a Mexican-American man who had fought in the Pacific and returned with nightmares he never spoke about, simply said, "I'll be there." 4 against Jake's group. The odds were not good, but they were better than 1. Sam also spent Friday following Jake Morrison, watching as the man loaded 10 gallons of gasoline into his truck. Far too much for any legitimate purpose. When Sam confronted him in the parking lot, Jake just smiled. "What's the gasoline for, Jake?" "Farming equipment." "You don't farm." Jake's smile widened, showing teeth. "Maybe I'm taking up a new hobby. Saturday night, 2 in the morning. You should stay in your bunk, McKenna. What happens won't concern you." Sam grabbed Jake's shirt, pulling him close. "If you hurt them, I'll kill you." "You won't." Jake pushed him away. "You're too good for that. Just like you're too good to let us do what needs doing. But Saturday we'll find out if your goodness is stronger than our numbers." That night, Wade came to Sam's room. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, just looking at his friend. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out the pistol, his father's old service revolver from the First War. "Keep this for me," Wade said, holding it out. "Saturday, if I have it, I'll use it wrong." Sam took the gun, felt its weight in his palm. "Where will you stand?" "With you." Wade's voice was barely above a whisper. "With Tommy." They clasped hands. Not the casual handshake of friends, but the warrior's grip, forearm to forearm, the way men did when they knew battle was coming, and one or both of them might not see another dawn. Saturday arrived wrapped in false peace. The morning was clear and bright, with that particular quality of Texas light that made everything seem sharper, more real. Sam went through his routine, feeding the horses, checking fences, doing all the small tasks that kept a ranch running. But his mind was already in the dark hours ahead, already planning positions and fields of fire, and how to protect 20 women against men who had convinced themselves that cruelty was justice. At sunset, the camp held the barbecue. It had been planned weeks ago as a celebration of peace, a chance for the community to gather and remember what they were supposed to be fighting for. Now it felt like a last meal before execution. The brisket had been smoking since dawn, 12 hours over hickory and mesquite, until the meat fell apart at the touch of a fork. The smell alone was enough to make strong men weep. Ribs glazed with red sauce, corn roasted in its husks, beans thick with bacon, coleslaw tangy and cool. Grace sat near the fire with Keiko, both of them watching the festivities with the wariness of animals who had learned that peace was always temporary. Sam brought them plates piled high with food. "Eat," he said simply. "Whatever happens later, eat now." Grace looked up at him, and in her eyes Sam saw that she understood, saw that she knew something was coming. But she took the plate, and she ate, and when the first bite of brisket hit her tongue, she smiled. It was the first real smile Sam had seen on her face. Someone started playing guitar, an old cowboy song about home on the range. Other voices joined in, rough and unpolished, but honest. The music drifted up into the darkening sky like smoke from the fire. Wade sat across the flames from Grace. Their eyes met. Wade raised his bottle in a small salute. Grace nodded back. It was not friendship, not yet, but it was something. A tentative truce. A recognition that they were both human beings trying to survive the weight of the dead. Sam checked his watch, 9 o'clock. 5 hours until Jake and his men would come. At midnight, Sam positioned his people. Martha at the north corner of the women's building, Roy at the south. Carlos covering the main approach. Wade at his side. Each of them armed, each of them knowing what was at stake. Inside the building, Grace and Keiko kept watch over the other women, knives hidden in their sleeves, the piece of wood Sam had given Grace propped against the wall. The minutes crawled past like wounded things. 1 o'clock, 1:30. The moon rode high and bright, turning the Texas landscape into something alien and beautiful. At 1:55, Sam saw the lights. 6 trucks, more than he had expected. Jake had recruited beyond his original group. Sam counted silhouettes as men climbed out. 12, maybe 15. All of them carrying something. Gasoline cans, torches, guns. Sam stepped out into the open rifle held across his chest. Martha, Roy, Carlos, and Wade emerged from their positions, forming a line between the trucks and the women's quarters. Jake Morrison walked forward until he was 20 yards away, close enough to talk, far enough that it would be hard to miss if it came to shooting. "McKenna," Jake's voice carried across the still night. "You really going to do this?" "Last warning, Jake. Turn around and go home." 4 people, Jake laughed, against 15. "You're dumber than I thought." Wade stepped forward. Sam had not expected that, had not expected his friend to make himself the first target. But Wade walked out into the space between the two groups, hands empty, nothing but his own body as a shield. 5 people, Wade said. "I'm with Sam." Jake's face twisted with fury. "Hollister, you traitorous son of a bitch. Your own brother died because of them, and you protect them." "My brother died asking me not to become someone he'd be ashamed of." Wade's voice was steady. "I'm done disappointing him." "Then you die first." Jake pulled his gun. The night exploded into motion. Sam saw Wade dive to the side, saw Jake's muzzle flash, heard the crack of the shot. But before Jake could fire again, Sam's rifle was up, and he was squeezing the trigger, putting a round into the dirt at Jake's feet. "Next one goes into your leg," Sam called out. "Stand down." More shots. Roy's shotgun boomed, taking out the knees of a man who had tried to flank them. Martha, God bless her, put a bullet through someone's hand with the calm precision of a woman who had been shooting rattlesnakes for 50 years. Carlos fired 3 quick shots, dropping 2 men who had been rushing with torches. The burning brands fell to the ground, setting fire to nothing but dirt and grass. But there were too many. For every man who fell or fled, 2 more pressed forward. Sam saw Jake's group beginning to surround them, saw the noose tightening. Then the door to the women's quarters burst open. Grace stood there, the piece of wood in her hands, and behind her every one of the Japanese women. 20 of them, each one holding something that could be used as a weapon. Kitchen knives, broken chair legs, tools from the garden shed. They did not attack, just formed another line, another wall between Jake's hatred and the thing he wanted to destroy. Jake stared at them, at 20 women who had every reason to cower and hide, but who instead had chosen to stand. At 4 Americans who were willing to die to protect people they had been taught to hate. At Wade Hollister, who had lost everything and still chose mercy over vengeance. Something in Jake's face crumbled. Sam saw it happen, saw the exact moment when the rage that had been holding the man together simply gave out. Jake dropped his gun, dropped to his knees, put his face in his hands. "Bobby," Jake whispered. "Oh God, Bobby." Bobby was Jake's brother. The one who had died at Guadalcanal, the one Jake never talked about except when he was drunk. The other men lowered their weapons. One by one they began backing away, getting into their trucks, driving off into the night. Within 5 minutes, only Jake remained kneeling in the dust, crying for a brother who had been dead for 3 years. Wade walked over to him, knelt down beside him, put a hand on his shoulder. Two men who had lost brothers. Two men who had almost let that loss make them into monsters. "It's okay," Wade said softly. "I know. I know." Sam let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. Behind him, he heard Grace's soft footsteps. She stood at his side, looking out at the scene before them. Wade and Jake crying together. Martha and Roy and Carlos lowering their weapons. The danger passed, at least for now. "Thank you," Grace said in her careful English. Sam looked down at her, at this woman who had every reason to hate all of them, but who had instead chosen to fight alongside them. "You stood up." "You stand first," Grace replied. "You show me how." Later, after Jake had been helped away by his remaining friends, after the others had returned to their bunks, after the adrenaline had drained away, leaving only exhaustion, Sam found himself sitting by a small fire behind the supply building. Grace appeared out of the darkness and sat down beside him, closer than she had ever sat before. "I want to tell you," she said quietly, "about before, about me." Sam said nothing, just waited, giving her the space to speak or to stay silent, whatever she needed. And Grace began to talk, haltingly at first, then with growing confidence. She told him about the village near Nagasaki, about her parents and her brother Thomas who had died in the war, about the day the officers came with their promises of factory work in honor. She told him about the comfort station. Not the details, never the details, but the feeling, the daily erasure of everything she had been, the way they had taught her that she was nothing, that she would always be nothing. "They call us comfort women," Grace said, her voice breaking. "Like we exist to bring comfort. But no one think about our comfort. No one care if we live or die." Sam listened to it all. Listened to the pain that poured out of her like blood from a wound that had never been allowed to heal. And when she finally fell silent, when the words ran out and only the crying remained, he spoke. "Grace, look at me." She raised her eyes to his. "What happened to you was not your fault. It was never your fault." Sam's voice was fierce with conviction. "You are not damaged. You are not dirty. You are not nothing. You are a survivor. You walked through hell and you came out the other side. That makes you the strongest person I know." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hands in his. "You deserve love, Grace, not because of what you survived, but because of who you are. And who you are is brave and kind and worthy of every good thing this world has to offer." Grace looked at their joined hands, at this man who had lost his sister to her people, but who still chose to see her as human, who still chose kindness over hatred, mercy over revenge. The walls she had built around her heart, the walls that had kept her alive but kept her from living, began to crumble. She did not know what the future held, did not know if she could ever truly trust. Again, love again, believe again. But for the first time in 6 years, she wanted to try. And that perhaps was miracle enough for one night. Sam had come to recognize the rhythms of Grace's days. The way she rose before dawn to tend the garden, moving through rows of vegetables with the careful attention of someone who found peace in small acts of cultivation. The way she sat with Martha in the kitchen, learning English through the vocabulary of food and fellowship. The way she sometimes touched the jade bracelet on her wrist and stared at nothing, her mind traveling back to places Sam could never follow. But 3 weeks after the confrontation with Jake Morrison, Sam noticed something new in her expression. A distance. A sorrow that seemed deeper than the usual weight she carried. He found her sitting alone outside the women's quarters, holding an envelope with foreign stamps and script he could not read. Tears ran silently down her face. "Grace," Sam approached slowly, hat in hand. "Bad news." She looked up at him, and the devastation in her eyes made his chest tighten. She held out the letter with trembling fingers. "My aunt, in Japan. She write me." Grace's English had improved remarkably, though it still carried the careful precision of someone translating thoughts from another language. "My parents, they die. Nagasaki. The bomb." Sam knelt beside her chair, close enough to offer comfort, but still respecting the space between them. "I'm so sorry." I think maybe they alive. Maybe I go back someday, see them. Grace wiped at her tears with the back of her hand. But now no one. Village gone. Everything gone. Your aunt is still there. Yes, she say come home, say I serving, so I must live with head high, not ashamed. Grace's voice dropped to a whisper. But I am ashamed. Sam wanted to take her hands to pull her close and tell her she had nothing to be ashamed of. But he had learned that healing came slowly, that trust was built in increments. So he just sat beside her in the dust and let her cry. After a long while, Grace spoke again. Aunt say Americans kind to me. She not believe at first. She think I lie or I crazy because Japan say Americans are monsters. What did you tell her? I tell her about you. Grace met his eyes. About cowboy who give me water, who protect me, who make me feel like person again. Something shifted in the air between them. Something that had been building for weeks, maybe months. Sam felt it like the change in pressure before a storm. Grace, I need to tell you something. But before he could continue, the camp bell rang, summoning everyone to the main hall. Commander Harrison stood on the platform, a sheaf of papers in his hands. His face was grave as he waited for the assembled prisoners and workers to settle. I have an announcement regarding repatriation, he began. The United States government has arranged transport for all Japanese prisoners currently held in domestic facilities. Ships will depart from Galveston in 2 weeks. Everyone will have the opportunity to return to Japan. The words hit Sam like a physical blow. 2 weeks. Grace would be gone in 2 weeks. He looked across the crowded hall and found her eyes already on him. In that moment of connection, Sam saw his own grief reflected back. She did not want to go, but she would because that was what was expected. Because her aunt was waiting. Because she did not know she had another choice. That night, Sam could not sleep. He paced his small room like a caged animal, wearing a path in the floorboards. Wade found him just after midnight, sitting on the corral fence and staring at stars that offered no answers. You're going to let her go, Wade settled onto the fence beside him. It's not about letting. She has family in Japan, a whole life waiting for her. She has a life here too, if she wants it. Wade pulled out a cigarette, lit it, watched the smoke curl up into the darkness. You love her. It was not a question. Sam did not bother denying it. Doesn't matter what I feel. She deserves to choose her own path. Then tell her what her choices are. Tell her she could stay. Tell her there are programs for people who don't want to return. Wade took a long drag. Tell her you love her, you damn fool, before it's too late. Sam sat with those words long after Wade had gone back to his bunk, turning them over in his mind like river stones, feeling their weight, their truth. He thought about Hannah, about the life his sister had never gotten to live, about all the words left unspoken when death came too soon. He would not make that mistake again. The next evening, Sam found Grace in the garden as the sun painted the western sky in shades of amber and crimson. She was kneeling between rows of tomato plants, her hands dark with soil, her face peaceful in the fading light. Walk with me, Sam offered his hand to help her stand. They walked in silence to the corral where Sam had spent so many nights wrestling with his grief and his choices. He climbed up onto the fence, and after a moment's hesitation, Grace climbed up beside him. Their shoulders touched. It was the first time she had willingly closed that distance. You don't have to go back, Sam said quietly. To Japan. There are programs, ways for people to stay if they want to build a life here. Grace was silent for so long that Sam thought maybe she had not understood. Then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Why you tell me this? Sam turned to face her fully, took her hands in his, felt them trembling. Because these past months, watching you find yourself again, watching you learn to smile, to laugh, to trust, it reminded me what it means to hope. After Hannah died, I thought I'd never feel anything but grief. But you changed that. Sam, I am broken thing. I cannot be what you need. You're not broken. Sam's voice was fierce. You're the strongest person I've ever known. You survived 6 years of hell, and you came out still able to see goodness in people. Still able to choose kindness over bitterness. That's not broken, Grace. That's extraordinary. Tears spilled down her cheeks, catching the last light of sunset. I don't know if I can love. Too much damage. I'm not asking you to love me. Not right now. I'm just asking you to stay, to give yourself the chance to find out who you can become when you're not defined by what was done to you. Sam squeezed her hands gently. Stay, Grace, please. Let me show you what your life could be. She pulled away from him, then dropping down from the fence and walking a few steps into the gathering darkness. Sam's heart sank. He had pushed too hard, asked too much. But then Grace turned her back to him, and in her eyes he saw something he had never seen before. Not just hope, not just trust, but possibility. I need time, she said, to think. Take all the time you need. You have 2 weeks. For the next 3 days, Grace moved through the camp like a ghost. Sam watched from a distance as she talked with Keiko, with Martha, with the other women who had become her friends. He saw her sitting alone for hours, the jade bracelet turning over and over in her fingers. Saw her writing letters in Japanese characters he could not read. Saw her standing at the camp's edge looking east toward an ocean that separated her from everything she had known before. On the 4th day, Wade came to Sam with a request. I need to talk to Grace before she decides. Sam found them together in the garden an hour later. Wade holding out 2 objects, a photograph and a handkerchief embroidered with the letter T. Grace accepted them with reverent care, studying the photograph of a young man in uniform. Tommy Hollister, 18 years old, dead on an island most Americans could not find on a map. He was the best person I knew, Wade said, until I met you and Sam. You taught me what my brother wanted me to learn. That hatred only keeps wounds open. That forgiveness is what sets you free. Wade placed the handkerchief in Grace's hands. I've carried this since he died, but I think you should have it now. Because giving it to you, that's me finally letting go. Finally choosing to live the way Tommy wanted. Grace looked up at Wade, this man who had once wanted her dead and who now stood before her offering his most precious possession. She bowed deeply in the Japanese way, a gesture of profound respect. You good man, she said softly, your brother proud. Wade nodded once, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. He touched the brim of his hat and walked away, leaving Grace holding the pieces of his grief and his redemption. The morning the trucks were scheduled to leave, Sam stood at the loading area watching prisoners climb aboard. Keiko found him her small bag of belongings clutched to her chest. She not coming yet? Keiko said. I know. You love her, Sam nodded. Keiko smiled, the first real smile he had seen on her scarred face. Good. She deserved love. You deserve love. Both of you deserve second chance. The trucks pulled away, carrying women back toward a homeland many of them barely remembered. Sam stood in the settling dust, his heart hammering against his ribs, wondering if Grace had made her choice. Then he heard footsteps behind him, turned, and there she was. Grace walked toward him with her head held high, no bag in her hands, no goodbye in her eyes. Just determination, just choice, just the raw courage it took to turn away from everything familiar and step into an unknown future. I'm not going, she said when she reached him. I stay. With you, if you still want. Sam felt something break open in his chest, something that had been locked tight since the day the telegram arrived telling him Hannah was gone. I want. God, Grace, I want. She stepped into his arms, then letting herself be held for the first time without fear, without calculation, without the weight of 6 years of survival crushing down on her shoulders. Just a woman choosing to trust a man who had proven himself worthy of that trust. I don't know if I can be good wife, she whispered against his chest. I don't know if I can be normal. I don't need normal. I just need you here. We'll figure out the rest together. They stood like that as the dust settled and the sun climbed higher, and somewhere in the distance, a mockingbird sang its complicated song of joy and survival and the strange beauty of second chances. The years that followed were not easy. Grace had nightmares that woke her screaming. There were days when she could not bear to be touched, when the weight of memory crushed her so completely that all Sam could do was sit nearby and wait for the storm to pass. There were moments when she looked at him with eyes that saw not Sam McKenna, but every man who had ever hurt her. But there were also mornings when she woke smiling, evenings when her laughter rang clear and true across the ranch they built together. Quiet moments when she would reach for his hand and hold on tight, anchoring herself to the present, to safety, to love freely given and gratefully received. They married in the spring of 1947. Martha cried, Wade stood as best man, and Grace wore a dress the color of Texas bluebonnets, with her mother's jade bracelet gleaming on her wrist. Their son was born in 1948. They named him Thomas after the brother Wade had lost. Tom McKenna came into the world with his mother's dark eyes and his father's easy smile, and from his first breath he was loved with a fierceness that defied description. The ranch prospered. Grace's garden grew. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, two people who had been broken by war learned how to be whole again. 10 years after Grace chose to stay, a letter arrived from Japan. Her aunt was coming to America, coming to see the life her niece had built in this strange land so far from home. The day she arrived, Grace stood on the porch of the white farmhouse she and Sam had built together, watching a taxi make its way up the long dirt road. Her hands trembled. Sam stood beside her, his arm around her waist, steady as the earth itself. The elderly woman who emerged from the taxi had silver hair and eyes that held both sorrow and joy in equal measure. Grace ran to her, and they embraced in the yard, crying and laughing, and speaking in rapid Japanese that flowed like music. Later, Grace brought her aunt to meet Sam. The old woman studied him with the sharp gaze of someone who had seen too much of the world's cruelty to be easily fooled. Then she smiled and spoke in Japanese. Grace translated. She says, "You are the man who gave me water, the first kind man I met in this country." "Yes, ma'am," Sam said. The aunt embraced him, then this cowboy who had saved her niece in ways that had nothing to do with rescue and everything to do with seeing her as human when the world had taught her she was not. 8-year-old Tom came running from the barn where Wade had been teaching him to rope hay bales. He skidded to a stop in front of the great aunt he had never met, eyes wide with curiosity. "Mom, who's this?" Grace knelt beside her son. "This is your great aunt. She came all the way from Japan to meet you." Tom, with the unself-conscious boldness of children, went forward and hugged the old woman. She held him tight, this bridge between two worlds, this proof that love could survive even the worst that humanity had to offer. That night, after the celebration had ended and the house had fallen quiet, Grace sat alone on the porch. The jade bracelet caught moonlight, turning it into something magical. She had worn it every day for 20 years, through the comfort station, through the prison camp, through her marriage and the birth of her son, through every moment of her transformation from victim to survivor to woman who had chosen her own destiny. Now it was time to pass it on. She walked quietly to Tom's room. Her son slept peacefully, clutching a stuffed horse Wade had given him for his birthday. Grace placed the bracelet on the nightstand beside his bed. "One day," she whispered, "I will tell you the story about your grandmother who gave this to me, about the years I kept it hidden to remember I was loved, about everything that happened terrible and beautiful to bring us here. And you will understand that no matter how dark the world becomes, love always finds a way." She kissed his forehead and left the room. Sam was waiting in the hallway. "Everything all right? Everything perfect?" Grace took his hand. "For first time in my life, everything perfect." They walked out to the porch together, looking up at the vast Texas sky, the same stars that had witnessed their first meeting, the same moon that had hung over the night Sam chose kindness over hatred, mercy over revenge. "Do you ever regret it?" Sam asked. "Staying here instead of going back to Japan?" Grace thought about her aunt now, sleeping in the guest room. About the language she still spoke, the traditions she had passed to Tom, the heritage that flowed through her blood. She thought about Texas, about barbecue and Coca-Cola, and the cowboy who had changed everything with a tin cup of water. "No," she said, "I don't regret, because everything, even terrible parts, led me here. To you, to Tom, to this life." Sam pulled her close. "Hannah would have loved you." Grace smiled. "I think I would have loved her too." They stood together in the darkness, two people who had found each other in the aftermath of war, who had built something beautiful from the ashes of tragedy. Behind them, the house held their sleeping son and the aunt who had traveled across an ocean to witness a miracle. Before them, the Texas night stretched on forever, full of stars and possibilities. 20 years later, in 1966, another war was calling America's sons. Tom McKenna, 18 years old, received his draft notice for Vietnam. He sat at the kitchen table, the letter trembling in his hands, while his parents watched with hearts that knew too well the cost of war. Sam went to the shelf where he had kept it all these years. The tin cup, dented and worn but still solid, still real. He placed it on the table in front of his son. "You see this?" Tom nodded. This is what I gave your mother the first day we met. Just water, nothing else, and it changed everything. Sam sat down across from his son. In war, it's easy to become a monster. Hard to stay human, but that's when being human matters most. What are you saying, Dad? I'm saying the enemy is human too. Not devils, not monsters, just people caught up in something bigger than themselves. Sam pushed the cup toward Tom. Fight if you have to. Defend your brothers. Do your duty. But don't ever lose sight of the fact that on the other side there's someone's son, someone's brother, someone who matters to people who love them. Tom picked up the cup, turned it over in his hands. What do I do with this? You remember it. And if you see someone who needs water, no matter who they are, you give it to them. That's how we win. Not by killing the most people, but by staying human when everything around you is trying to make you into something else. Tom stood and embraced his father. Grace watched from the doorway, tears streaming down her face, watching the legacy pass from one generation to the next. The lesson that had saved her life now being entrusted to her son. The tin cup sat on the table between them, just a piece of dented metal. But in the economy of miracles and the currency of redemption, it was worth more than all the gold in the world. It was proof that kindness could survive hatred, that mercy could outlast revenge, that love freely given to a stranger who had every reason to expect cruelty could echo across generations and change the shape of the future. Sam McKenna had given water to a frightened Japanese woman in 1945 because his sister believed people should be seen as people. And now, 21 years later, that single act of compassion was sending his son into war with the tools to keep his own humanity intact. This was how the world healed, not through grand gestures or sweeping changes, but through small moments of courage, through the choice to see the human in the enemy, through the simple offer of water to someone who was thirsty. The tin cup would go with Tom to Vietnam, and it would come back. And one day he would pass it to his own children, and the story would continue rippling outward like circles on water touching lives that Sam and Grace would never know in times they would never see. But it all began here, in a prison camp in Texas, with a cowboy and a comfort woman and the space between hatred and hope where miracles are born. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and indifferent and beautiful. And somewhere in the house, Tom McKenna packed his things for war, carrying with him a dented tin cup and the knowledge that kindness was its own kind of courage. The legacy lived on.